What's up everyone? Welcome back to Willson Builds. If you're new here, I'm Zach. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're returning from a previous video on my channel or my Instagram, your support is greatly appreciated, and thank you for showing up to today's video. We're back on the 29 chassis. Well, I guess it's actually we're back on the 32 chassis for the 29. Now that the motor's out, we can get quite a few more things done, I'm hoping. Just a lot of, finicky stuff. We have to figure out the steering, routing the brake lines. There's a couple things we have to cut off and basically make smooth again because we had the motor mounts, we have a top crossmember mount we have to worry about. I've cut a notch out of the kind of lower mid crossmember that we have to fix and strengthen up again, as well as drill and tap for the transmission mount, and yeah, finish the motor mounts. Just a lot of little stuff, but now that the motor's out, it's much easier to do. So we're gonna tackle that today. All right, so we have a lot of important jobs to do today. I mean, we're really close to finishing the chassis and getting it ready for paint. But first things first, we gotta do some of the little jobs that transition more into the big jobs. So for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna start with mounting the transmission mount, and then we'll worry about the middle cross member. And then while we have the welder out, we'll weld the rest of the motor mounts, take these motor mounts out, and then we gotta worry about steering and brakes. And I don't know which one comes first, because if you have to worry about the brake lines, it might run into the steering and so on and so forth. But I've basically summed up that as soon as we cut these off, we have enough gap. I'm not worried about gap with the motor. I've already looked at it a lot to put our steering mount in. So we'll do that, and then we'll maybe do, I think we can do brakes first, or I don't think it matters what we do first is what I'm trying to say. But let's just get the little jobs over with first so I'm not on my back grinding right off the hop, and then we'll worry about the more difficult, dirty jobs later in this video. Okay, so as you can see, we've modified this already. We cut this out originally because we were gonna replace kind of from back here over, but it ended up working out really good. We also cut out a cross member here because the transmission hit. So we're just working with that right now. So we gotta take these mounts off. This one might be a little bit more difficult, but we'll work towards that. I mean, we don't really have to take it off, but for peace of mind, I'm gonna try my best. But anyways, so we'll have to weld all around there, which we can now because the motor's out, as well as in here. And then we'll have to do a plate here as well, like I did here, to clear the transmission, because the transmission kind of comes in like this. They're gonna look a little different, but that's just because the transmission pan has a hard right corner and then a bit of an angled corner. But oh well, I'm not too picky about that. So first things first, I'm just gonna drill these guys so we can put bolts in for our transmission mount, and then we can take our transmission mount out and finish welding the actual mount itself onto the cross member piece. All right, so I'm gonna worry about fixing this patch now. As I said before, we patched this side. So I'm just gonna cut out a small piece of this plate, and then we'll kind of fine tune it to what we have to fill here, and then weld it in. And then we can start working on the little stuff, kind of making stuff smooth, finishing this weld, this weld. We'll cut out the old motor mounts, cut off this old cross member, try and do this one. Like I said, I'm not too picky with this one because it's behind there, but it'd be nice to get it off. And then, yeah, just kind of fine tune everything and try to get it to a point where I'm happy with it. And then we can start working on more intricate stuff like brake lines and steering. So let's get this in first and then we can worry about that after.
Okay, so this is the hole we're trying to fix here. So I'm just trying to cut this down to a point where, actually that's pretty good. Move that for now. But to simplify it, I'm just gonna make marks. Make it a little easier. Basically just cutting off.
All right, so we basically have everything sort of where we want it. I want to start grinding the old welds off the motor mount and what we welded on that patch and so on and so forth. But I'd like to weld our existing motor mounts because I never welded the sides. I just welded the top because it was convenient at the time. But now the motor's out, I can get right in here and we can start welding the mounts. Now that we got those all welded up, we can start cleaning up this top bead and making it all smooth and kind of even with the frame. And then I'm gonna come back into these motor mounts and grind them down even to the frame. And then we'll also head back to the cross members. There's a couple pieces where I've just put a bead just to fill in a little bit of like a indentation or somewhere where our grinder went a little bit more deep. And then we can start just essentially just making everything smooth. And then basically the frame, I'm trying to think if there's any other little bits we have to worry about, but basically the frame will be done. I mean, not done in the sense of done, but I mean, all the welding and fabrication besides the steering box will be finished. So I think that'll actually be it. So yeah, let's start the grinding. It's gonna be a messy process. It is pouring rain outside too. So the 55 has to stay in while we do this, which sucks, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm not too picky about that, but yeah, let's get our metal blender on the death wheel and yeah, start the process. All right, now that we have everything set up, I mean, grinded down, made it look a little bit better, we can obviously go back in when the frame's disassembled, so we can flip the frame upside down and take care of a few other little things, but we'll wait till the frame's disassembled to do that. So I want to worry about the steering now. This is a Vega steering box from Speedway. Why I went Vega, I don't know, but we're here. I've just heard that they're good, so that's what we used. I don't know any better. So we have to get it pretty close to our front link here, but not a big deal. We might have to notch out the engine mount just a tidge on the bottom to let this fit in here pretty good, but it's sitting pretty decent right now, so we might be good. Speedway actually hooked us up with a mount or a template because I'm not too sure how this would work, but obviously two bolts, you weld that plate in, should work. These bolts I've figured will go under the frame. This one's gonna be a little bit different, so I did get a new I guess piece of this metal, so we just have to build this mount, and what we'll do is we'll tap the top so we can have two bolts on the bottom, and then a tap coming through the opposite side and tapped in. So I think right here is gonna be pretty decent, but we're not gonna really know until we get our new bracket made. So let's start making it. All right, so this is the bracket that Speedway gives you, and it would probably work for some applications, especially if the frame, you know, is like running like this, but our frame is quite thick, being a 32 frame. So this bolt just doesn't work on the top. So we're gonna have to thread this hole so we can go from this side, and then the frame kind of runs, I don't know if this is a bad example, but like this. So we can actually have access to these bolts. So not a huge deal, but we don't have access to the top one, meaning we have to make a new bracket. So, I mean, we probably could just put a bolt and weld it on this side, but that's kind of hokey and I don't really want to do that. So we're making a new one. I won't be able to cut this radius with what I have, but we can make it look decent. We'll just go from here to up here and just make a straight mount. It doesn't really matter that this curve is here, truthfully. And try to make it as best as we can. First things first, I would like to drill the holes that we're going to be playing with. I clamped this down so we can get a good punch in there. Actually, we'll use our transfer punches. They're numbered, but they're weirdly numbered. There we go. I think that's the one. A little smaller. If you don't have a set of these transfer punches, go get one. It makes life so much easier. That's pretty close. We'll use that one. So realistically, it could probably go there, but it won't work there because then our link will be on a bit of an angle. So we'll have to hog this piece out a little bit to move this forward, which isn't a big deal. Still a little low, but that's okay because we could just cut this bracket as well and get this right up in there. All right, pardon the mess, but this is what I came up with. It's obviously not as pretty, but you'll never see it underneath the steering rack anyways. So, plain and simple, nothing too fancy. Let's get it on and see how we're doing here. Okay, so let's see how we're working here. Yeah. I think that's going to work just fine. Still have lots of room for our bolt here. Still have lots of room to get at this top nut if we ever had to. It sits pretty decent. We've got a good gap. Right about there. And we had a good height. Perfect. All right, so after fiddling and kind of mocking up in a few different areas for the last couple hours, I've decided that here is going to be our best place. It's maybe not the best place kind of in the bigger picture, but for me and the setup we're running and the motor mounts where they are, this is going to work out best for us, I believe. So I put it backwards a little bit, I put it forwards a little bit, I put it higher, did all the measurements, and I think this is going to be the best place. And I'll show you why. So the reason that I think this is the best setup for us, and I'm not talking about the best setup in general. The best setup in general would probably be removing this motor mount, raising the Vega box, and kind of adjusting it from there. And let me give you some context. So when the motor's in and the body is on, this front end will probably be sagging, I don't know, let's call it 1 inch. So the Vega box should be parallel with our steering arm when all the weight's on it. So if we adjust it now where no weight's on it and we set it up like we are, when we put the weight on it, the Vega box will sag and into the steering arm won't sag, so it'll be kind of off cantered. So it won't be parallel with our tie rod. So why am I doing it this way? Well, I think it's because there's not really any other way to do it. Well, that's just my uneducated opinion. And we're not super bad. We're here at bottom of our pitman arm is 8.5 inches, and the bottom of our steering arm is almost 8 3/4 inches. So we're like not even a 1/4 inch off. So the Vega box, yes, it's a little lower, but we could always heat up and bend this pitman arm up. We could also run our tie rod ends that we're going to be using on the top of the pitman arm, and that will give us that 1 inch. As you can see, it will, well, let's measure it. We're looking at 8.5 inches there. And if we ran the pitman arm on the or the drag link on the top, we'd be at 9.5. So it actually fixed that issue. And I got that idea from Lee, so thank you, Lee. And that made kind of this job a lot easier. So we are going to go with this position of the Vega box because it's most convenient for our steering linkage and our drag link up top. So is it the best? No, but is it the best for our situation? I think so, because I did try moving this Vega box back, and then we're not parallel with the tie rod and the drag link from up above. It's off cantered. I know that's not super important, but for peace of mind, I would love to have it parallel. So I think there's going to be more pros to doing it this way than opposing way and having the box up a little higher. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack the mount in, and then we can kind of figure it out from there once we get our drag link in. I just ordered it, so we'll be able to adjust it quite a bit as well once we have it in, and we can measure it out. We can bend the pitman. We can do a lot of things to fix it. It'll steer great without the motor in. When the motor's in, we'll have to see. But yeah, let's get to tacking this, and then we can move on to making the brake lines. Okay, now that we have our steering box in place, I'd like to start going on the brakes. So I got these awesome T-connectors from Gas Classics from Performance World, and they just look so much better than the little brass ones you can get. Hopefully they perform just as good. But what I'm thinking, run my brake line along the frame here, try to either get it underneath or through the Vega box, and then we'll put the connector here, so we can have one bottom one coming out here, this guy, I guess that'd be the right one, coming underneath the frame and into the, I guess, rubber line that will be coming from our caliper. So there's a couple different variations that we need to think about. So I think firstly we should probably look at mounting the rubber lines, and then we can kind of figure out what bends and stuff we need to do in our hard lines. But these make a huge difference because I'm not really afraid to have these exposed because they look cool. The brass fittings sometimes, you know, if you see them, they look a little out of place. But these chrome fittings, these T-fittings are sweet. So I'm gonna go ahead and start looking at the rubber lines and seeing what we have to do to mount them. And then we can figure out what we need to do. I don't know how well you can see those marks. 1, 2, 3, half, half. So we got to take this line now and figure out where we want it. I think there's going to be pretty good on 2. But we also have to watch the cable over here as well. So let's, and we don't want the line because we're going to do the hard line off the crossmember. So we don't want it You know, coming super far off. I drilled and tapped this and put it on. So we're gonna run this back to the brake pedal, and then we're gonna run this guy down, little curve into that one. And this one is gonna, actually, this one might come down and into that one, but I'd like to get that one in there. And then this one can kind of follow that along the cross member and then into the lower one there. So we ended up getting, I think this is like copper and aluminum? No. Does it say on it? It's like a little bit copper and a little bit something else instead of just steel line. It bends really nice, which is nice. So, and it looks a lot better. So let's start making, I hate doing brake lines. We'll probably have to go buy more of this realistically, but we have to straighten a little bit of it out, and then we'll start working on doing some of the complicated lines. I think this part is gonna be the most complicated because it has some really compound bends, but I just like bending it, and then we can cut it and get it pretty decent. So I'm gonna, I think, do the one back to the brake pedal now. Actually, I think we're gonna do the harder ones first just to get them over with. So we'll start dissecting them now. So what we're gonna have to do, obviously we won't be able to bend that compact, so we're gonna have to do a bend, cut it to length, and then do another bend, and then cut it again to length. So we're using 3/16 right now, so I'm gonna put this in the 3/16 slot, and we're just gonna go as close as we can. All right, there is our first fitting. That should work decently well. So let's go flare these and get our pieces on the end. Hopefully they fit on the flare. Well, the line turned out perfect. I wish we were at the fitting. Right beside me on the bench. So we'll just have to build another one. Not a big deal. Okay, so we have the little guy now going into the left side. So now I need the bottom of the T to kind of come around, do a nice bend here, bend over here, bend again, and go into our right side. So I have these little connectors from Speedway, which will help us mount the line. And they just kind of look like that. And we'll just drill and tap them to the frame and make it look all fine and dandy. Now we start deciding where we want these. And these are great little things for 3/16. They probably make different ones as well. There's the part number from Speedway, but they look great. And they perform pretty cool too. So we need to figure out where we want to drill the holes. And I've made little marks at 4.5 inches here because I think that's where it's gonna Oop, that's where it's gonna have to go. Because when it's 4.5 inches from here, obviously the line, this one's longer, this one's shorter, but it's still gonna look somewhat the same in the same spot. So I'm gonna try and get a little bit higher here because we do have the leaf spring coming in here and I don't want our bolt contacting that at all. So we're gonna go right here, I think. Man, these things are junk. All right, we're going old school. Works every time. Okay, so what you just saw me doing was I put the brake line through where our spacers go on the steering box. So there's a lot of room in there, side to side, but it's also gonna keep it really safe from, you know, any road debris or anything like that. So all we have to do now is essentially just make bends to bring this up and then kind of midline it through here and then a bend over to here and then a quick bend back into the reservoir. So I think the first thing I'd like to do is try to figure out how we're gonna bend all this stuff and just make it safe. All right, now that we have our front brakes all figured out, we can move to the back. So I'm not gonna worry about the line running on the frame for right now. I'm gonna worry about the placement of our hard lines in the back here. We obviously have to do a soft line because of the suspension moving up and down. So we have to mount this connector, it's a T connector, to, I don't know, one of these. I'm gonna put it right there, I think. And then we'll run it on top of this cross member and have a good bend in it. So if the suspension were to go up or down, there's lots of this stretch. So first things first, I actually found this piece in my scrap pile. Small piece of metal, I just cleaned it up. And we can put that on our T connector. And that little tab can be welded to the rear end to hold that. And then we'll have a line kind of coming up over the differential into that side and one there. And then the one coming off the frame will come up here, hard turn to our other end of this soft line that will be sitting kind of right there. So pretty straightforward. I mean, we'll have to weld this tab on first and foremost, but not a huge deal. And then we'll just have to, you know, strategically bend our lines to fit what we need. So, I mean, you guys just saw me make a bunch of lines, so I'll probably time lapse this kind of process. So we got to start with cleaning the rear end up to weld our little bracket on. All right guys, so what you just saw is the drag link. It just came in the mail after about 3 days. It fits great. I'm super happy with how it fits. I was a little scared at first because when we took the bottom bolts out of the Vega box to fit the brake line, the whole box kind of went and tilted backwards, so it pushed the pitman arm towards the tie rod, so it made the gap a lot smaller. So when I initially put it in, I was kind of pissed off that we might have put it in wrong and tacked it in wrong, but when I realized it just needed to move back and then it gapped perfectly parallel all the way up, I was super happy. So that's basically done. Might have to play with the drag link position a little bit. We might have to put it on top of the pitman arm so we have that little bit of the angle to compensate for not having the motor in here, but not a big deal. We have a couple more things. We still have to run our main line from our cylinder back to our back brakes essentially. But before we do that, we got to put in our residual pressure valves. And I didn't know that these had to go in because this is the first vehicle I've ever done where I've done the cylinder on the frame. So I'm glad I saw this in one of LG Speed and Customs videos, and then I got these pressure valves from LG Speed and Custom from Lee. So we're gonna put them in today, and then essentially the brakes, fingers crossed they don't leak when we bleed them, will be done. So let's get these in. All right, so there's two different types of the residual valves, one being blue and one being red. So if you're running drums in the back and discs in the front, you'll put a blue, which is 2 psi, going to the front, and you'll put a red, which is 10 psi, going to the drums. Same thing if you're running discs in the front and discs in the back, you'll have 2 blues. If you're running drums in the front and drums in the back, you're gonna run 2 reds. So essentially, these allow the brake fluid not to siphon back into the master cylinder. So it makes your brakes more crisp and doesn't make the brake pedal feel spongy all the time. So I guess we should have maybe thought about this before, but I think this can go right there without an issue. I might have to rerun it a little bit, but not a huge deal. All right, so that's the last piece of brake we can actually get in this video because we ran out of brake lines. It is a Saturday and nobody's open to sell me these specific brake lines, and it's a stat on Monday. So, I mean, we just have to connect this guy to the back. So nothing crazy exciting, no weird bends, no nothing. So we'll leave it out, but for the sake of the video, I have a small block Chevy over there that we just painted in the last video you saw, and the transmission painted. So I'm gonna connect those and drop it back in. I mean, we can look at it, that's cool, that's one factor, but we can also, you know, make sure our brake lines and our Vega box have good clearance, and mostly because I just want to look at it. So let's do that. All right, guys, I'm gonna call the video there. I mean, although we didn't get, you know, the brake line for the master cylinder back to our kind of top cross member there, I'm not too worried. That'll be really easy to do, and then we'll just have to drill and tap for those grommets that you saw me putting in. But overall, we got a lot done, and I'm super happy where we got to, because how cool does that look? The motor's in. I mean, the motor's not done. I still have to put my torque converter in. I still have to seal the intake. I still have to seal the oil pan. That's basically it. I mean, obviously when the car's on, we'll be able to hook up the kick down and the throttle and all the spark plugs and stuff like that and kind of get it wired. But there is a purpose why I put this motor in. It's because I like to build an exhaust before we paint the frame, because then we can, you know, if we have to weld a tab to the frame or drill or anything like that, I won't be hurting the paint. So you'll probably see me building an exhaust in the next couple videos to come. There's gonna be a lot more videos of the Roadster compared to the Mercury and other stuff, only because we have a lot of little jobs to do, and they're all kind of falling in order congruently, and we're able to do them kind of simultaneously while we do other jobs. And we're still waiting to find a motor now for the Mercury, so we're kind of at a standstill there. But anyways, guys, if you saw something you like, dislike, something to improve on, if you want to see something specifically done to the Roadster, or if you just want to show your support, please do so in the comments below. And while you're there, don't be afraid to hit that like, subscribe, and notifications button so you know when we're uploading, which is every Friday. But yeah, stoked. I mean, we learned a lot doing the brakes. I didn't know we had to do the residual pressure valves, but here we are, and they're in. And yeah, I think I'm just gonna sit back and kind of take this all in and look at it and be happy with that. But anyways, guys, we will see you on the next video of Willson Builds. Thanks again for tuning in.